I wanted to talk about some Week 11 takeaways, and I wanted to start with a game that I think was off a lot of radars because I think a lot of you had already maybe gone out to eat or maybe tuned out for the day. Oregon ended up beating Washington State last night. 43-29 was the final. And I really believe this was the most significant off-the-radar result yesterday. If you're ever thinking in terms of your national top 15, top 10 picture, maybe your fringe playoff conversation, maybe potential teams who could see a surge late in the year. Well, Oregon's in that conversation. Obviously, they just started their season, but they're in that conversation. They were down 19-7. If you look at this final score and you don't know anything about the game, you may not guess that. They were favored by, I think, 10.5, and so they were -3 turnovers in this contest. We value turnovers at around 4.75 points per play. So if you just do the simple math there, that means we think a 10.5-point favorite should lose the game outright if they have a -3 turnover margin. Not only did they end up winning, they ended up covering. Tyler, well, actually, I was talking about someone else. I was talking to a dude named Tyler today, and we were talking about the pronunciation of the Oregon quarterback's last name, and then Colin and I had a little debate about it too. Shuck. Just ignore the spelling. Mr. Shuck was 21 of 30 for 312 yards, 4 touchdowns last night. And again, in come-from-behind fashion in far less than ideal weather conditions in Pullman, Oregon had 353 yards in the second half alone. It was a legitimate come from behind and then cruise past someone type performance. It was, to be honest with you, a style of play that I don't know that a lot of people thought Oregon would be capable of early in the year. Keep in mind, this is not only a new quarterback there, but it's a new offensive coordinator in Joe Moorhead. It's an entirely reworked offensive line, and they were put in a situation on the road at a place that's not been kind to Oregon, to say the very least, over the last number of years, and they end up just cruising past Washington State. So despite all those issues, they win, they cover. For those of you interested in that, what could this mean? So again, like I said, it's off the radar. I don't think a lot of people are taking away a lot from this game. Here's what I took away from it. Do you remember earlier in the year when, well, let's use Ole Miss for both of these comparisons. You had Florida play Ole Miss. They won. Their defense looked bad, but they won. Alabama played Ole Miss. Oh, they looked bad defensively, but they still won. A lot of people had their doubts about those teams respectfully after that game. Well, Oregon had defensive issues last night. They got it done. Offense showed life that, again, I don't think a lot of people, maybe myself included, thought they'd possess early in the year, and they got it done. You can walk away from this game one of two ways. You can either say, ugh, I mean, great, they won, but really you had to come from behind against Washington State, and I'm supposed to take you seriously as a playoff contender? Well, were we not saying the same thing about Florida in week one? Excuse me, there's no we here. I bought Florida after week one. Some people who were doubting Florida said, they're not going to be a serious contender. They couldn't even stop Ole Miss. Well, in retrospect, you realize it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, is it? Alabama has had some struggles defensively early in the year and still found ways to win. Florida, Ohio State has not lit the world on fire defensively. My point is, be careful just eliminating a lot of these teams from conversation when you've only seen them scratch the surface of what their overall potential will be this year, and they just have some defensive issues. If you can score, and you got a solid coaching staff, and you've got the actual pieces, the talent that's necessary, then you'll see some defensive progression from Oregon this year. So my point is, will we look back on this thing a month from now? That's the kind of perspective you're going to need, and say, well, there was a struggle win for Oregon, and it was just part of an overall decent year. You know, 1 or 2 losses, still good enough to win the Pac-12, but not a playoff contender. Or will it be a game you look back on and you say, around halftime of that Washington State game, that's where you can kind of pinpoint this role that Oregon's gotten on since then. And maybe we're sitting a month from now and we're definitely talking about them in the playoff conversation, saying, hey, man, remember, we didn't think a Pac-12 team was ever going to even going to sniff the playoff. But now with the way Oregon's looked ever since halftime of that Washington State game, I'm just saying that's the way it could happen. So keep an eye on Oregon. Florida is there. They're already in the conversation. 63-35, they beat Arkansas. I was asking myself, if I told Arkansas Friday, you're not going to be able to take Sam Pittman down there, you're going to be without your coach, and we're going to give you 35 points. Would you have taken that? Would you have taken your chances with 35 points? I think the answer is yes. No Kyle Pitts in this game. It's a game where Florida's coming off Georgia, so, you know, in the classical sense, it's the old do down, which is really overused, and it's a methodology that some of you use for betting that's about 15 years too late. It's all baked into the number, friends. That's what I'm trying to tell you. If you're aware of it, odds makers are aware of it, but keep using that. Just like you keep using so-and-so's 8-3 on grass at games before 3:30 p.m. since 1992. Like that stuff matters, but I digress. 63-35 is the total, or is the final score here. And the point I want to make is all that stuff's true. Kyle Pitts was out. It was a game coming off a Georgia win that they had desperately wanted for a number of years now. When you get to a certain tier, and there aren't many of them in that top tier, but you've seen Alabama do this in the past. You've seen Clemson, Ohio State, and that's about as long as the list is, able to do this in the past. When you get to the top tier, a lot of these external factors, let down, look ahead, emotionally drained, like all that stuff, it kind of doesn't matter anymore. Because once you get above that certain threshold, the freeze point, if you will, into the top tier, you just render all that stuff irrelevant. And there were a lot of people, I guarantee you, last night that ended up giving Arkansas a look, especially Arkansas plus the points, and they told themselves, Kyle Pitts out, letdown spot coming off that Georgia game. Man, Arkansas's exceeded expectation this year. Felipe Franks going home to the Swamp. We gave it a lot of run last week. We didn't take Arkansas plus the points, but we entertained the idea. Wasn't happening. Wasn't happening. Really never in doubt here. And so good on Florida. Defensively, again, if you've watched this team, defensively, they have limitations. But like I said with Oregon, until you can find me a team that's going to be in the playoff out there that's going to put an elite defense on the field, because I haven't seen one yet this year. Until you find one, that means Florida can win a national championship. They can win the SEC. If they don't win the SEC, they can still get in the playoff. And they can put themselves in position, if they bring whatever their A game is and do enough defensively, situationally, perform well in the red zone, they can win. They can do it. They absolutely can. Notre Dame 45, Boston College 31. I had upset texts in the iJosh yesterday morning from some unknown people who will remain nameless unless they want to name themselves. I was kind of worried about this game for Notre Dame, just judging by years past and judging by the quote I gave you on Thursday's show, which went something like this: you take no game for granted when you're limited at quarterback. Because of that mentality, I was worried about them here. They were a 13.5-point favorite, and they went on the road, and they ended up winning by about that margin, but in reality, they were in control of this game most of the way. They were very balanced. If you believe balance is found in statistics, Notre Dame 283 yards passing, 278 yards rushing yesterday. Ian Book, the 0 in the interception column, again, the most important stat here, but he was 20 of 27 for 283, 3 touchdowns, really good day. They were not handing the game away. Now, they did fumble and lose 3 fumbles, so -1 turnovers on the road week after that Clemson game. You'll take the win. Obviously, you'll take the win. You know what they feel like to me? Because they had 31 at the half in a week where you would expect maybe them not to click offensively. They had 31 at the half, and Boston College grabbed an early lead, and then they bypassed them, and it was comfortable at the half. They feel like a team in ascension mode. They feel like a team kind of like Florida's felt a little bit this year, and all the great teams end up having this in common. They keep getting better. And you end up looking week over week, and then maybe at the end of the year, a month over month, and you say, this team's significantly better than they were a month ago. If you're going to be a contender, you have to, by default, by the very nature of what the other contenders are doing, you've got to exhibit those characteristics. Notre Dame's exhibiting those characteristics, and I know a lot of people just have this stoic picture of what Notre Dame football is in their head. It doesn't ever change. The personnel change, the names on the back of the jerseys change, but you just have defined what they're capable of and what their limitations are. I don't believe in that. I believe every team is unique under that team, and every year is unique under that year. Notre Dame, their next 4 weeks, they are off this week. They go to North Carolina, Syracuse at home, at Wake Forest. Certainly they'll be favored in all those games. They have yet to drop one. So they are bound for, in all likelihood, another ACC championship. Well, they've never been in one. Another appearance against Clemson, in all likelihood, in the ACC title game. Going to be fun to watch. Going to be fun to watch. Miami, speaking of the ACC, I told you last week, I think I said it on air, I certainly said it on the podcast, our numbers, our model, told us to take Miami. I was not going to touch them until it got to +3, and it never got to +3. It stayed at +2. Miami ends up winning the game 25-24. I told you our model had Miami winning by 1. So in a way, our model could not have sniffed out this game any more effectively. but it never got to 3, so we never took it. This was a pretty under-the-radar good win for Miami yesterday. They were missing a lot. They almost didn't play this game, and that they would have had in common with a lot of other teams across the country. Virginia Tech sort of controlled this thing, and then Miami scores the final 12. They got 2 touchdowns towards the end. And I was reading over on Inside the U earlier today, which is our Miami branch of the 247sports.com network, and David Lake, he made a really good point over on Inside the U. He said, Miami's won the past 3 games. So, again, it's been kind of off the radar. It's been a little quiet, but they've won their last 3 games by a combined 9 points. So they're winning the close games, and they're winning games, period. What's the trend there? They have not turned the ball over. No turnovers in those 3 games. That's it. I mean, you look at this game last year against Virginia Tech, it's a perfect microcosm. They lost it close last year because of those reasons. Well, they won it this year because of those reasons. They are 7-1. Or the Miami Hurricanes, 7-1. A lot of talk out there before the season. Will they be above or below 500? Well, they're 7-1. They got Georgia Tech this week. They're favored by around 20, somewhere between 18 and 20, depending on where you look. Then they're at Wake Forest, and then they got North Carolina to end the year. There's a chance here. I mean, there's a chance where they get up around 9 or 10 wins. They also could lose all 3 of those games. It's very close. They're a very close, low margin for error team right now, but as long as they control the football, as is the case with most teams, they give themselves a shot.